Hello class and welcome back to More Class Review. I am your teacher, Mrs. Moore. How you guys doing today? As you see on the board here, I have another 6th grade math lesson. This is lesson 1.2, integers and opposites on a number line. As you see, it says 1.2, so that means that there is a part 1, which is lesson 1.1, and it's identifying integers and their opposite. That lesson basically is a prerequisite to come into this lesson. It has all the lesson vocabulary that you would need. On that video, there's also a quiz that is there, and there's also some teacher note that is there. So if you have not watched the first video, pause this video, go to the first video, watch the video, do the quizzes, and then come back to this video. It will help you understand it a little bit more, okay? All right, so now before I get started here, I'm going to do a little refresher just to refresh a little bit here. You see we have our number line, we have our positive numbers, and we have our negative numbers. Positive numbers are numbers that are greater than 0 and can be written with or without a positive sign. So you see I have 1 here and plus 1, so that is positive 1. That is positive 1. 1 is with the plus sign, 1 is without. On the left side of my number line here are negative numbers. Negative numbers are numbers that are less than 0 and always have to be written with a negative sign or a minus sign in front of it. So this is how negative numbers should always be written. Okay? So, now before we get started, I want to ask a question about opposites. How do you find the opposite of an integer? Right? Since basically that's what we're working on, integers and their opposite. How do you find the opposite of an integer? So, to be able to find the opposite of an integer, the opposite of an integer is the number that is the same distance from 0 on the opposite side of 0. Okay? So, let's make this make sense. So, we're going to use 4. Okay, so the opposite of 4 is negative 4. Why? Because it is the same distance from 0 on the opposite side of 0. So let's get our blue mark out here. We're going to plot 4 here. And we want to find the opposite of 4. So we will go to the other side of the number line. And we will see how many units we have from 0 that equals the same as the right side. So on the right side, we have 1, 2, 3 units from 0, and that gives us our next unit, which is 4. So if we look over here, we'll plot that right there, and that is negative 4, which is the opposite of 4. So, which in vice versa, it'd be the same way. So the opposite of negative 4 would be 4, right? Because it is the same distance from 0, but it's on the opposite side of 0. So that would give us our opposites. All right? Make sense? Kind of getting it here? Okay. Let's make some room here. We're going to get into our lesson and try to drive this thing on home. So let's see here. Get these out the way so we don't confuse ourselves with that. So we have Sandy kept track of the weekly low temperatures in her town for several weeks. So we have the graph of Sandy's tracker for her low temperatures. Okay, so you see our chart is color-coded here, and that's how we will graph or plot. Graph and plot means the same thing, but I know younger primary use plot, and more middle school, high school use graph, which means the same thing, okay? So, let's get started here. We have graph the temperature from week 3 and its opposite on a number line. So we're going to find week 3. Hey, we just did this, so this should be easy for us. Week 3 is negative 4. So we're going to plot our -4 here. And they want us to plot its opposite on the number line. So we know that the opposite of -4 is +4 because it is the same distance from 0 on the opposite side of 0. All right? So let's go down to B. The value for week 5 is the opposite of week 1 value. What was the lowest temperature in week 5? So, okay, let's break it down. Part B got a lot of steps to it, but it's real easy, and you just have to pay attention to the words to make sure that you're getting it right. Because if you see, it says the value for week 5 is the opposite of the opposite, right? So let's break that down before we go further. What is the opposite of the opposite? So let me get enough. We're going to use our green marker here. And we're going to use -4 since we used that before. We already kind of know what the opposite of -4 is, right? So we have -4. And we want to find the opposite of -4, right? So got -4 here. The first opposite, I'm just going to put op on the board. I'm going to put first opposite like that, right? So the first opposite of -4 would be +4, right? Because it is the same distance from 0 on the other side of 0. So now that we're here, we need to find the opposite of the opposite, which is the second opposite, right? So basically, we're trying to find the opposite of +4, which takes us back to -4, right? So the opposite of an opposite is itself. The opposite of the opposite. It's tongue twisting, but I got it here. The opposite of the opposite is the number itself. Okay? So, the opposite of -4 is -4. If that makes sense, let's try to do this again. So we have -4, and we want to find the opposite of -4. I know it's a lot to say, and it kind of tongue twisted you and kind of makes your brain mess up, but it's gonna correlate. It's gonna come together. So the opposite of -4 is -4. So the first opposite, if it's only asking for one opposite, that means that it's asking for the opposite number on the other side of 0. If it's asking for the opposite of the opposite, that means it's asking for the number itself. Okay? So I'm just going to erase this right here, but I'm going to leave this up here. So we can see this. The opposite of the opposite is the number itself. So let's go back to B. The value for week 5 is the opposite of week 1 value. What was the lowest temperature in week 5? So week 1 temperature is -1. Right? So, oh, Mark, what is that? We're going to put all the red here over -1 because that is the value. We want to find the opposite of week 1 value, right? To be able to find out what was week 5. So we have -1. So now we need to find the opposite of -1. Let's break it down like we did before. So we got -1. Our first opposite would be what, class? If you said +1, you are correct. That would be the opposite of -1. So now we need to find the opposite of the opposite, right? And the opposite of the opposite is the number itself. And the opposite of number -1 is -1, right? So the value for week 5 is the opposite of week 1 value. So week 1, we're going to use blue here So week 5, I mean, not week 1, week 5 is -1, right? That's the value for week 5. What was the lowest temperature? Wait, that's right, yeah. What was the lowest temperature in week 5? The lowest temperature in week 5 was -1, which is the opposite of week 1. Okay? So, now that we have answered our questions here, let's do I'm going to do a quick reflection. And our reflection today is basically the whole meaning of this lesson. And it's something that we needed to know. And our reflection says, explain. What is that? Explain how you find the opposite of the opposite of any number. So our reflection says, explain how you find the opposite of any number. And that's basically what we said. The opposite of the opposite of a number is the number itself. My mind went blank right quick. Okay? The opposite of the opposite is the number itself. Just like lesson 1.1, lesson 1.2, we have a quiz link down in the description going along with the lesson. It will also have the teacher manual attached to the end of this video for the parents so that they can have the notes that they would need to be able to go in further if they would like to, or to be able to help you with this. Okay, so come on back and join us for our next lesson. Our next lesson will be a 3rd grade ELA lesson. Make sure that you're here for that. Also, like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And thank you for joining class today. You guys have a great day.